Thank you very much for joining us for a special presentation of Beyond the Headlines. We are sitting here today in this beautiful chapel, which is also known as K Spiritual Life Center at American University. And I'm sitting here with four amazing people, a lifetime opportunity to be sitting here and to be talking about our different faiths with these people. Thank you very much all for joining us, giving us the opportunity to do this. My first question, Stephanie, I would like to ask you, Yom Kippur, and you just experienced it, and you were also fasting, and we are fasting in the Muslim religion too. Please tell us a little bit about what is Yom Kippur?
Yom Kippur is part of the Jewish calendar, which takes place every year. It marks the start of the new year on the Jewish calendar, and there are two holidays that are observed within sort of a 10-day period. The first is Rosh Hashanah, which was 10 days ago, and that was the day that marked the Jewish New Year. And then between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is 10 days later, all Jews are asked to sort of reflect on the year that's passed and think about what they want to do differently. Based on your reflections, how would you like to reform yourself and just approach the world in a healthier sort of fashion, and also think about those whom you need to ask for forgiveness. And then the Yom Kippur marks the day that you actually do, I guess, submit to prayer for the entire day, and a way of doing that is through fasting, and it allows you to just focus on the holiday itself. And then by the end of the day, you will have sort of cleansed yourself of any sins, but on a lighter note, just on any of the misgivings that you've had from the years past, and start anew the following day. So unlike Ramadan, which is for an entire month, my understanding is that it's a similar process, but just within a shorter time span.
Exactly, but I think the essence is that we go through a lot of introspection, and that's what Yom Kippur fasting is also talking about.
It's very personal.
Yeah, and Ramadan is almost the same thing. But David, we are starting off with one factor, which is fasting and introspection, and we know that Christianity also shares the same point of view. How can you comment on this aspect of fasting in Christianity?
I mean, I feel like there's different sort of branches. I mean, with either Catholicism, growing up as a Catholic and a Protestant in my family, I experienced this inward idea of my relationship with God and forgiveness in different ways. I mean, with Catholicism, I had the guidance of a priest who would help me, who I would confess with. I could do it as almost as often as I want. Whereas, in more Protestant in my family, Baptist background, it was very internal and very personal. Where you could have long periods of prayer where you're asking for forgiveness and reflecting upon your own actions. I feel like we don't have this. I mean, Easter somewhat to the extent of of course we don't have any fasting necessarily, but Easter somewhat is similar, at least in my family, that we had an extent of, like reflecting upon things and how could we emulate, the life of Christ and things of that nature. It was, for some of us, it was, a constant reflection. I mean, if not, some people it's every Sunday, some people it's on a daily basis.
What about puja? I mean, is there an element of fasting in Hinduism?
There's a lot of elements of fasting. I don't exactly know when those days are. I think it really depends on each person's individual beliefs, because there's so many gods and goddesses that you can fast on different days of the week. And I personally don't fast, but my mom and dad, and sometimes my brother, they fast every Monday and Thursday. And me, I feel like I'm running around so much, I usually don't, but they fast every Monday and Thursday, and if it's a special event, like a special puja, which is my name and means prayer in Hindi, and it's a very big element of Hinduism. If there's a special puja or a special holiday, they'll also fast for that.
So Clark, here we have three people saying that, there is a commonality in our religions. For example, element of fasting or introspection. Do you think there is a God? And if there is a God, then what are we fighting about?
What a question. I mean, in terms of my own religious background, being Unitarian, it's very interesting when I go to church because they don't say God, or they rarely do, because the religion itself basically is guiding its members on their own spiritual path. And so some people don't believe in God in my church. I do. I think there is a God, and I think that God works His own way with each person, or each faith, or each religion, you know. And so when I'm in church, I hear them say, you know, spirit, or source of love, or, you know, something that still can mean God to people, but to those that don't believe it or don't subscribe to the same, you know, exact principles, it can mean something different to them. And that's a really neat thing. I mean, a common thread that I see is that my whole religion is about introspection and finding your own path and talking to people and looking at different sources. So we could read the Quran, we could read the Bible, we could read, you know, Desmond Tutu, or, you know,
Torah.
Yeah, or the Torah, or, you know,
Gita.
Or, you know, Sherlock Holmes or something like that, you know, and see where else there's guidance from writing and other people's thoughts in life.
Fantastic. But tell me something, Stephanie. We know that there was a time when the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews have lived together and have coexisted. Why can't we do that now? I mean, why is there so much of hatred in the world when it comes to different religions? Why can't we just accept each other as we are and just live in peace?
Yeah, I don't know. I ask myself this often, both as a Jew and also as a graduate student and as an American. And it's troubling because in the world today, in which there is so much movement across borders and where we have the opportunities to interact with people of different faiths, of different nationalities, of different backgrounds, that we're not able to get along, I think it's important to try and get to know one another on an individual level, to sit down with another human being and get to know that person, not just as a Christian or as a Muslim, but as a person, and see their religion as just one part of who they are, and therefore find commonalities. And I don't know how much that's happening.
First of all, we're human beings,
Right.
you know, and then we can be whoever we are. But, you know, I mean, talking about India and Pakistan, for example, is just like America and Canada, you know, and yet there's so much of hostility. Even though Hindus and Muslims have lived together for hundreds of years in that part of the region, but now there's animosity. Why do you think that is happening? Do you think religion has a point in that, or part to play in that, or do you think that it's just misconceptions?
Well, I think, I mean, they have lived more than hundreds. It's been thousands of years, thousands and thousands of years, and I think it's a very recent phenomenon what's going on recently with the hostilities, because India is has the second most amount, either the second number or second percentage of Muslims in the world, and they're in India. I mean, that's the second nation with the most Muslims. And up until recently, they got along, and it's only a phenomenon that's lasted 100 years, maybe even just 50 years in the past thousands. And I think a lot of that is just political. On the basic level, most people in these two countries feel that way, feel that really their cultures and their religions are very, very similar, and that for them it's not much different. But I think a lot of it comes to just governments not wanting to solve problems and instead focusing attention, diverting attention away from their own internal problems by pointing out an enemy. There's a problem, an internal crisis, so you go create a war, or you go point out an enemy because it diverts attention from the real problem. So I think at heart, most Indians and most Pakistanis don't have a problem with each other and are just as comfortable in each other's religious organizations or with each other as friends. And I've seen so many examples of this throughout my life and throughout my parents' life. I've heard of so many examples that really it's just a political problem which we as common citizens who don't believe that need to come to these positions of power so that we can turn things around.
David, you mentioned a while back about Cordoba in Spain, a living example how Christians, Jews, and Muslims live together, thrive together, still using their technology of water filtration. So what happened?
I mean, part of it was, I mean, even as, you know, Pooja talks example, I mean, other human beings happened. I mean, we see countless times, whatever religion, whatever country you speak about, I mean, oftentimes because the fallibility of human beings often take over a good thing. And I mean, I look back and some of the first of a class we're all taking together. You know, one of the main examples he talked about was Cordoba, in Spain, and between the 8th and 15th century, talking about how everything was working together, and different cultures, the Jews and Christians and Muslims, I mean, work so well together. And then you have the incursion of basically a monarchy that, under the cloak of Christianity, supposedly backed by the church and supposedly backed by the faith, goes in and reconquers the area, Reconquista, and basically probably ruins one of the greatest things this world has seen, and that has influenced unknowingly to many people, Western civilization and things of that nature. One of the things that I read about in my own readings, talking about the Arabic translation movement that happened during that time period, where all the Greek philosophy, medical literature, all these other things that really helped inspire what was the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, that really created what is quote-unquote Western civilization, came through Arabic Muslim scholars. That, I mean, it's astounding to me.
And again, the politics seem to clash against just everyday normal people who were fine and who got along and created a whole renaissance just working together until this political move happened.
Looking at what's going on since 1947 in the Middle East and the conflict between Lebanon and Israel and Palestine, what kind of thoughts go through your mind? Because, it's really interesting, sadly, that, for example, people in Pakistan or the subcontinent would really like to know, how do you take it as a human being? What do you see going on when you see a conflict between Israel and Palestine?
It troubles me, again, on multiple levels, not just as someone of the Jewish faith, but also as an American, as a graduate student, and as just a human being, because I see people who are not reaching out to get to know their neighbors as human beings, and instead are seeing their neighbors through a political lens, or maybe through a religious lens. We need to come to a solution where everyone feels they are able to live in dignity with their neighbor.
Do you think the peaceful solution for Middle East would be, let's share it. Let's give each other the right to exist. Let's give each other the respect. And let's share the land. Do you think that would make a difference?
I think that the land already is holy for more than one people, for more than one religion. And so if there's a way to allow people to share that land and to be able to just feel at peace with the history that's brought them there, and the circumstances in which they live, then yes, I would like the land to be shared.
Clark, David mentioned about the Cordoba time, but if you look at that time, that is a time we're talking about of entrepreneurship, science, technological advancements, all these different faiths sitting together and thinking about bringing new things to the world and adding all of that. So we were able to do more things together when we were working as one, rather than what's happening right now. What would you comment on that?
Well, I think that is a great point, that working together you can do more than, working individually. And it's interesting that in America there is the opportunity to work together, and there is the opportunity to have a discussion like this, for example, but around a conference table at work. Anybody from any faith can work here at American University, or can work in a corporation, or at a TV station, or at a newspaper, or whatever.
So this is the new Spain, that means.
Right. That would be my point. Yeah, like we're in a new era of technological innovation and growth and change, and exciting and it's making a lot of positive things, but it's a tumultuous change, and you can't just switch over to having YouTube and the internet communications and video and instant messages and email without, going over some bumps in how all that becomes part of normal life.
Do you think an open society, dialogue and communication would actually benefit?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, dialogue, allows the spread of ideas. The idea that if one's goal and the idea is dealing within a form of democracy, democracy breeds, and feeds off of different viewpoints and different perspectives. Creativity breeds off that. Any kind of effective decision-making, breeds off multiple viewpoints, finding out what the best course of action is by seeing, different people's perspectives, things of that nature. It creates a form of respect between everyone by listening to everyone's points of view and digesting them, understanding them. Allows everyone to understand each other, and therefore we can know how our actions affect other people. And it just creates a certain, community atmosphere that is much more productive, as we saw with Cordoba and in Spain.
Do you think religion has something to do with that, or perceptions of our faiths?
I would say it's perceptions. I would say it's, as you're saying, people who are not educated. They might be a smart person, but they haven't studied the texts. They haven't taken the time to just get to know people of other faiths. And so when I hear on the cable news channel, the Islamic terrorists, or when I hear the president say that or whatever, that changes my own perceptions. And I think we were talking about it earlier that, it's not necessarily, we wouldn't say the Catholic terrorists in, Northern Ireland or whatever, we would call them the Irish Republican Army. So it's all in the perceptions and the way that things are communicated. And I just see it as very, unfortunate, the perceptions as they are right now.
You have to be able to ask questions. You have to be able to, you have to have the humility and the strength to ask how someone else views a certain issue, to be able to even conceive of looking at an issue from another perspective. And, the beauty of what I found in my own religion, in Judaism, is that I'm able to continually interpret the texts and the values in my own life as I continue to grow and as I continue to see the world. And I think that that's important, that we need to be able to, yes, look back to the text.
Every life age or something, we should go through a renaissance of our own. Whatever the fight is between the people who believe in the ideology of Osama bin Laden and the West, it is politically motivated. Because we have an example of the Muslims, millions of Muslims living in India. Why haven't we seen any terrorism acts committed by them? What would you say on that?
Because in India, they aren't, when it comes down to perceptions, again, in India, they aren't perceived as this large threat. In India, they aren't this enemy that lives thousands of miles away. They're your neighbor. And I think that's an entirely different change in things. They're the person next door, and because of that, there's a more human face. You get to know the person. You're not just looking at it as a religion which you know nothing about and judging it. You're taking that person for what they are. You're learning about that person, and you're interacting with that person. And I think that makes a huge difference. And I think instead of taking things black and white in this country, we need to start meeting people of different faiths and start interacting with them, and that'll change your viewpoint completely. I know for me, coming to college, I've been the sort of person that I think because of my rich culture, I'm very open to embracing people of different faiths, but I also came into contact with a lot more people than I had ever had in high school. And because of that, I saw different people of different faiths, and I'd go out with the Jews and I'd say, I don't understand this, explain this to me. And I'd hang out with them and interact with them as people. Like I'd go to Muslim dinners and I'd interact with them as people. And along the way, I learned a little bit of information about each, and I learned more and more about each. And I think because of that, I'm interacting with a person on a person-to-person basis, on a human basis. And I think that's an entirely different shift and an entirely different approach which we need to move towards.
That's a very good point here, Stephanie. You know, one of the questions that we had in mind were effects of reality, the facts, and the differences. In easy words, accepting the facts of our own religions.
Well, you might all need to correct me if I'm wrong, but because the Jewish texts were written before the Islamic and the Christian texts, there was not necessarily mention of the other religions of the book. You know, just to take a modern day example, I think rabbis and scholars can now talk very much about the issue of living in sync with other people of other religious faiths, and I know that even within Judaism there are different denominations.
Tikkun.
Tikkun is a Hebrew word, means to sort of spread healing to others, and I think that would be a philosophy that could very much be applied in this day. I was just talking about different denominations of Judaism. You have Orthodox, Hasidic Judaism, and Conservative, and Reform, and Reconstructionist, and there are probably others that I don't know of. And then you have Jews, I'm sure, who go to Unitarian churches as well and choose to create their own path.
What do they mean by Zionists? What is that? We hear that coming from Osama bin Laden and all those extremists. Who are they?
This is where it is important to go back to where the words came from and who spoke the words initially. And in the founding of Israel, the founders were originally secular Jews who believed in having a homeland for their people where they could feel safe and secure, and they were called Zionists.
How can we learn to accept the facts about each other's religion? First of all, how can we find the facts? Because there's a lot of misinformation. And then how can we learn to accept it? When will we be able to realize that there is a problem and we accept it and let's fix it?
How does a person of a certain religion, fix the perceptions of its religion or of its own?
Exactly.
No, exactly. Part of it is, I think specifically with the Christian's perspective right now is, you have a plurality of different Christian perspectives, and the dominant one now is an evangelical Christian group that is very, as we've talked about before, very black and white. I hate to put it in these different propaganda terms that have been put politically. Is either it's somewhat of an either or.
Either you're in or you're out.
You're either in or you're out. That's part of their evangelical, part of the evangelical nature is the fact that that's why you're trying to save people.
But that's what President Bush asked President Musharraf. Either you're in the war of terror or out of the war of terror.
Exactly.
He's not exactly looking to dialogue with President Musharraf.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's a definite, perceptive problem. And part of it is this. Is understanding that it isn't just a simple understanding that there is something wrong, and we talked about illiteracy of one's own religion and one of others. I think of my own family, in terms of their lack of any notions or not acceptance, but their awareness of other religion, other cultures, because they're in a very Christian society. They've barely met a Muslim or a Hindu or even a Jew within their own neighborhood or in their own community, and they ask me, why are you studying Islam? And they're like, aren't those the people that the president calls Islamo-fascists or and these other things? And I talk about them. No, these are the commonalities between a Christian and a Muslim or Judaism and how they have these commonalities, and these are the differences. But they're really not that different when you think of them in terms of faiths. We were talking in our last course about what a faith is, and then somewhat within reality and political terms, again, we were going to our point before of how human beings have what they've turned their faith into, and understanding the separation between those two are needed with understanding one's own religion and understanding others. who's truly representing, the religion. And I think that separation and that understanding within one's own religion, is just as important than even before you attempt to analyze someone else's.
If I could just add, I think that this might be the case in each religion, and this is something that I talked about in synagogue, or I discussed in synagogue yesterday, was the notion of before you go out to seek understanding or knowledge about another religion, you have to look inside and understand and seek knowledge about your own self and develop compassion for your own self. And until you have compassion for your own self and you can follow the morals that you would want others to follow on yourself, then you're not able to really listen to other human beings. You're not able to really talk. And so I think one of the things we can do to get the facts is to take a step back from even that and just look within ourselves, be comfortable with our own identity, understand what is our own identity, and be comfortable with the notion of maybe a fluid identity as well, that it can mold and grow based on our contact with other people, and then go out and seek knowledge and seek experience. But I wonder if people are really applying the value of introspection that each of our religions preaches.
Fantastic. Clark, do you think there's a future? Come on. It's a big question.
I think, and this is something that came up in my church service this weekend too, was the idea of hope. And if people have hope rather than pessimism or optimism for themselves, but hope for good for everyone, there's definitely a future. And I don't see it happening any other way. I think there has to be a future.
But how is the question?
I personally think that my parents' generation, the generation before us, and I guess my grandparents' generation, that generation before them, they really messed up the world. And they're basically leaving us with this chaos and all these tatters, like everything strewn in just complete chaos, and we need to clean that up. Like, they've just left us with this horrible inheritance right now, and we need to clean that up. But I think at this point that so many people of this generation, just looking around, I know that I go to a very liberal university, but it's still just looking around and meeting different people who are optimistic, who want to go out and want to change things, and just have learned so much from being at college or being here, and just have learned so much from interacting with different people of different cultures and different faiths and just people from all over the country. I think that fills me with a certain sort of, it fills me with optimism. And I feel that we're going to be the generation who knows that we can't keep on repeating the mistakes that have happened before us. And we need to deal with each other as human beings. We need to start cooperating, because if we don't, there is going to be no future. But I also, I truly am optimistic about what's going to happen, because I think that we all know that, and we're going to do it.
What you're saying is that no matter where you are, no matter what religion you're following, as long as you have an open mind, you keep educating yourself, informing yourself, communicating with others, there's always a chance, there's always a hope that we can make this a better world. My last question to all of you would be, let's suppose that we're not able to achieve that, what we just talked about. Let's suppose the world becomes more chaotic. We know that the chaos in the world is caused by a bunch of you for their own political gains. If we are not able to succeed in making this a peaceful world and letting all the religions coexist together, what kind of legacy will we leave behind for the future generations, David?
At least I hope that we do have a movement, whether it's a small one that we're fighting the few that controls the means of everything else. That we can take pride, at least the people here on this panel, that can take the pride that we've attempted to do our best to make dialogue, to understand each other, and to move things forward in a positive format. And I mean, and the way you do that is through youth even younger than we are. We're young now, but that's how we leave it to the next generation, is by teaching the young and the youth. And that's, I mean, especially key as university students. We spread that to other university students and the youth later on, that you just continue the movement of these people, of our perspective and things of that nature, of looking for dialogue and things of that nature.
We have to let the youngsters know that if we don't do something about it, what kind of nightmare we can see, even worse than what we're seeing right now. So what would be your message?
I mean, I think I agree with David that it really comes down to just keeping an open mind and educating our younger, I mean, the next generation to come about not just, you know, math and science, but about different faiths, about different religions, about different cultures, and letting them have an education that opens their minds, that exposes them to different things. And I think that's really, really important. And I think that's something we need to work on. We need to work on those issues like poverty and education. We can't just keep on focusing on war. We need to work on those issues, because those are the ones that are going to drag us down if we don't fix them.
Even God did not take that right away from anybody not to exist. I mean, a snake exists, an elephant exists, Satan exists, because God is a practitioner of the best democracy we've ever seen. Keeping that in perspective, you know, what would be your message to the youngsters watching you?
Riding on what you just said, we need to practice, we need to honor and respect living beings, whether they be human beings or whether they be animals or whether they be... Yeah, no, we need to honor and respect one another for who we are. And if we don't do that, then ignorance will continue to grow. Textbooks will continue to present false information. People will become more reclusive, not venture out of their own communities, their own towns, and will have no interest in getting to know anyone outside of themselves. And that's a very scary, scary world.
Clark, anything that you'd like to add to these closing remarks, especially keeping in perspective that if we don't achieve, we will end up as failures?
I think that the progression of the world, or the progression of communications and connections between people and education and you know, values that of life, of tolerance, and so on, will help the world to take the next step and to see this, hopefully, peace. If not in our generation, but then in the next, because our generation is seeing that that's what we want. So in 20 years, when you know, we're making laws and rules and decisions that affect what America does or what other countries are doing and how they interact, it's going to be different than the people who are in power now or who were in power 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. So that's sort of my hope, is that, you know, if we can't do it, then our grandkids can do it. And you know, and it's going to happen because of communication and because more and more people are seeing more and more things. You can't, I mean, we know that there's, you know, dying children in Africa or in India or wherever, and soon they'll know that there's opportunity elsewhere in the world. And so it should all sort of click together.
In my Islamic studies, I often get inspired by the things, you know, the Prophet Muhammad has said, and like even, I mean, that even touches on, you know, the spirituality of Christian nature and other things. And just reading some other scholarly work, it was a particular surah, 49:13, that I think is very relevant to what we're talking about today. It says, "O mankind, verily we have created you all from a male and a female, and have made you into nations and tribes that you may come to know one another." And I think that, I mean, it was, I read reading in some paper that was exactly analyzing Islam in the West and how this relationship, and it seems like a call, for me it seems like a call for us to know each other and to live together. And it seems like they have called different traditions that we all share in common, that we can do these things.
And we can look at it this way, that if we don't learn to coexist with each other and amongst our different traditions and faiths, we will miss out all the beautiful food that all these faiths have to offer. Again, I'd like to thank you all. Thank you very much for being a part of this amazing discussion. We hope that we can have many more. Once again, Pooja Virani, David Montez, Stephanie Hertz, and Clark Greger. I was looking at the paper so that I don't make a mistake again. Thank you very much for being a part here and for whatever that you want to do in life. And we hope that we can do this again. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.